Welcome to Christmas Eve breakfast on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Emily Carver. Let's take a little look, shall we, at some of your newspaper front pages. Yes, the Mail on Sunday leads with King Charles using his Christmas address to emphasise environmental preservation. Oh, gosh. The Sunday Times reports on the NHS chairman's concerns over the doctors' strikes. The Sunday Telegraph leads with Lord David Cameron vowing to take a tough line on Tehran meddling in the Middle East. The Observer reports on two former health secretaries joining the growing demands to legalise assisted dying. That's really gathering a lot of traction. And the Sunday Express reports on Chancellor Jeremy Hunt assuring that Britain is on the road to prosperity. Oh, that's nice. We can stop worrying now, can't we? If Jeremy Hunt said it, then that's it. That's it. A happy year ahead, everybody. Well, joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines is political correspondent for The Spectator magazine, it's James Heal, and showbiz reporter Stephanie Tachi. Thank you very much, both of you.
Good morning, guys.
I don't know if we can bring it... I mean, the outfit on display here to the left is absolutely remarkable. There we go.
I feel sorry for the viewers at home. I look like a walking, talking Christmas tree, but
you're like a bauble.
I can get away with it once a year. This is the day for the outfit.
It's wonderful. James, you've not dressed up.
No, I feel like a proper Grinch next to Stephanie. Somewhat underdressed, perhaps.
Well, you've got us in the middle to buff you. So there you go.
No, well, look, what should we start with? So there's a story here that I've got at the top of the list, I think, from the Telegraph Online. James.
Yes, well, this is about, you know, Christmas Eve, if you will, pro-Palestine protesters disrupting Oxford Street Christmas shoppers. This is amid the call to boycott so-called pro-Israel brands. And I think what's really giving the story legs is how the Metropolitan Police responded to it in their statement, claiming that Oxford Street wasn't shut down. Well, actually, several shops did have to close their doors at a time when, of course, lots of people were going out and shopping. And I think this comes at a time when, you know, obviously there's no sign of the conflict coming to an end in Israel-Palestine anytime soon. And the question is, how many more weeks, etc., is London going to suffer this in the middle of the protests? And I think there's a legitimate question around, you can have right to protest, etc., but also there's a right to, you know, free movement of goods in terms of going to shops, buying, etc. People ought to be able to go and buy things at Christmas time.
What do you think about the whole police on Twitter thing?
Oh, God.
Because they release these statements and it just invites huge amounts of comment. Negative comment, positive comment, controversies. It seems a bit naff.
Well, what I really like is how the tone shifts. So sometimes you get these quite defensive, quite prickly ones.
Sometimes.
Quite snappy. And I feel like sort of there's almost a kind of, you know, a sort of smorgasbord of them in the Metropolitan newsroom wrestling over who gets control of the Twitter account, over who gets to post what, X, Y, Z. And I think that's quite jarring, really. I think they could have easily have said, this happened, this happened, this happened, in a very factual, clear way, rather than saying, well, there was no, and sort of lashing out at the media. I mean, I think it's fair comment to say parts of Oxford Street were shut down if shops did have to close.
It's weird to think that the Met Police have a social media manager, but they must do.
I just thought, you know, we were doing a bit of our Christmas shopping there yesterday. I don't know how you've been getting on with yours, but we missed that. So we got there early. It's the only time in my life
a good thing.
I've ever been at a shop before it's open.
Yeah,
we were
5
waiting
minutes early.
outside. But I suppose question marks as to whether or not, you know, 2 days before Christmas, whether it should have been allowed.
Gosh, you know what? It's very much been a year of protests, so these protesters are always going to hit retailers where it hurts. But I feel sorry for Zara because they are being mistakenly targeted here, Patrick, because this advert they're talking about, it came before the war even started with Hamas and Israel. So they are boycotting Zara for no reasons when they haven't done anything wrong. And again, it's like, what are you trying to achieve here? Because you're putting out the wrong message here. You know, you're not actually affecting or supporting your cause in the right way, I think, personally.
So you think it's a bit like the M&S advert that was criticised for the hats that happened to look like the Palestinian flag?
I think people just want something to get annoyed about. They want to be sensitive over no reason, you know?
Stephanie, I'll stick with you on this one now. So this is on the front of The Observer. It's gathering a lot of traction. I know that the Daily Express have been doing a heck of a lot with this as well. It's about assisted dying. Now, former health chief joins calls for new law. It's in the wake of Esther Ranson's plea, I suppose. What's going on here?
Well, you know, we've had two former health secretaries, Stephen Dornell and Alan Milburn, who've come out now and they're pushing for government to make a new vote about assisted dying, whether it's something that's going to be up for debate, I can see now, for next year. Even more importantly, it's something that's going to have to feature in people's election manifestos. And it's one of those topics now, especially as you've got someone high profile as Esther Ranson talking about considering assisted dying. I think she's kind of struck a match now where people actually are going to start thinking whether this should be a legal option in this country. And I think it's one of those things where it's a hard topic to talk about.
Yeah.
But clearly, it's not something that's going to be brushed underneath the carpet. And, you know...
Patrick spoke to Esther Ranson's daughter, didn't you?
To her daughter, I did. She was very conflicted about it initially, that's fair to say, for the obvious reason. There's also the risk that if you don't essentially wrestle a relative off a plane to Zurich, that you can then potentially get a knock on the door from the police, which seems a bit ridiculous. Yeah. I'm very conflicted about it, but I think we know in the year to come this is going to be a story that's dominating a lot of the political agenda. James, talking to somebody who's been dominating the political agenda recently as well, this is the Sunday Times, and NHS chairman, doctor strikes make me fear for patients.
Yeah, so this is an interview done by the head of NHS England, Richard Medding, and the sort of way in which they set it up is by saying that his wife broke her ankle earlier this year and then she had to wait sort of 12 hours in NHS overnight, to give an example of how it's affecting everyone. Look, there are 6.4 million people in this country waiting for 7.7 appointments. We know there's a huge kind of waiting list, etc. And the sort of nub to all this is the strikes which are going to go on next week. We're going to see junior doctors go on strike. As Richard Medding makes clear in the interview, there have been 40 days of strike action throughout this year, 30 of them by junior doctors. And the problem is they're going to exacerbate the issues around sort of service provision. And, of course, people who have long-term conditions, which normally would get them diagnosed, will do what they did during COVID. And so rather than going to a hospital next week because of all the strike action and they want to wait, they will then put those off, meaning that further down the line we're going to see more and more issues with the NHS and health outcomes.
Yeah, Stephanie, a lot of us won't realise, if we don't have to use the NHS at a specific moment, just how bad it has got with the strike action. But if you do need the NHS, you are going to be very worried.
Well, I think a lot of people, Emily, are taking their health into their own hands. We've now got this generation of Google doctors where, even for myself, if I have a problem, I think to myself, I'm not going to go to the NHS because I know, A, I can't get an appointment, or B, they're either on strike. So you are getting a lot of things where people are just trying to help themselves or diagnose themselves, which, again, I think is going to lead to a bigger health crisis down the road. And how many more strikes do we need? It's like they really need to come to the table and think, how do we resolve this now?
I mean, I have massive sympathy for health workers. They do literally save lives, OK? And, you know, by and large, they are heroes. I think the timing of the strikes is poor. And I think that it's inevitably the most vulnerable people in society who end up suffering as a result. And that is a real shame, borderline unforgivable. But if we're losing people to Australia, etc., we've got to respond to market forces.
Do you know what? I think there are probably quite a lot of junior doctors who don't agree with the strike action, but a huge amount of pressure from the BMA and from some of the more militant activists within the NHS. I do think not all of those doctors will have been, you know, accepting of this.
I'm looking forward to talking to you about this particular one, which is the eco-activist King and his Green Christmas Day message. So King Charles is going to use his Christmas broadcast tomorrow to deliver a powerful message about the environment. Stephanie, your name's next this one. We'll kick it off with you and then we'll go to James.
I think always with the Christmas speech, it always hits me that the Queen's gone, because the Queen always nailed the Christmas speech. And it was well-rounded. And then now we're into our second Christmas speech with the King. And obviously he's a green-fingered king. He's about his sustainability.
So sausage-fingered.
No.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
And that is what that is going to be his, you know, main agenda in this speech tomorrow. That's what we're hearing. He's going to be talking about sustainability, being pro the environment, and to be honest, he's got all the touches of eco-friendliness in this speech. He's going to deliver it in front of Buckingham Palace and in front of a living Christmas tree, so he hasn't gone for a plastic one. And also he's gone for biodegradable baubles as well.
Oh, well, there you go. Biodegradable baubles. Have you got those?
Well, in our family, we've actually got the same baubles we had during, like, the 1950s and 60s. So
well, that's truly sustainable.
I mean, that maybe says more about us and our sort of archaic tastes.
James, do you mind a bit of environment, eco-activism in a speech from the King? Because that doesn't necessarily have to be political, unless he starts commenting on, you know, ULEZ policy or something.
We live in hope. But I think you're right, Emily. It's a balancing act, isn't it? You know, I don't see an issue with someone, you know, buying a Christmas tree which they can then replant in the soil, or, you know, talking about conservation, etc. It's when it goes into party politics, etc. So I think perhaps after the experience with the Elgin Marbles tie, the King will wisely refrain from that.
Now, this is good. I find it difficult often, I know you do as well, because a lot of the news can be very negative, you know, and also that can be news that generates controversy, so it goes without saying that it is the kind of thing that people end up talking about a lot. But I think one of the
You always shy away from controversy, don't
like
you?
it myself.
He doesn't like it.
I don't like it, no. Just a nice, easy day at the office. But one of the reasons why GB News was really set up, I think, was to try to bang a positive drum for Britain in a way that you don't necessarily get elsewhere. And this is actually words, James, echoed by Jeremy Hunt, who's blasting the economic Scrooges, trying to talk Britain down. We are at a golden dawn, are we?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't perhaps go that far. I'm not that drunk on the Christmas sherry yet. But obviously, you would expect the Chancellor to talk about the positive success of the government. That being said, you know, I think, for instance, when you look at, say, the last 13 years, since 2010, Britain has had more UK GDP growth, according to the IMF, than, say, Germany or the Eurozone, etc. I do think sometimes, you know, as Orwell wrote about, we can have a country as sort of our intellectual elites to sort of talk us down a bit. And I suppose Hunt's argument in this piece, he's written for The Express, is that basically earnings are now outstripping inflation for the first time. So I think the most recent data said inflation was now at 3.9%. Earnings are at 7.3%, so they're going up. And the hope is that people will start to feel that effect coming through in the new year, and maybe we'll be out the worst of it of the post-COVID inflationary spiral.
He's a bit of a Scrooge, though, isn't he?
I think he is. He's been Scrooge all year long, and I think until people actually feel the effects of this so-called prosperity, we're all feeling pretty negative at the moment. We've lived through COVID, we're living through a cost of living crisis, we're living through inflation, even though the numbers are good this week. But again, it's like, why should people feel, you know, positive before actually we're feeling this so-called prosperity?
You know what I feel positive about?
Not.
Right? Christmas dinner.
Yeah,
Christmas dinner. I feel incredibly positive about Christmas dinner. I've always been a massive fan of it. We do want your pictures very shortly. We're going to be getting the first round of pictures from our wonderful GB News viewers, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yes.
What are you doing with your family, OK? And are you travelling back for Christmas? But, Stephanie, we've just got time to squeeze in something here. And there's a reason why I mentioned Christmas dinner, isn't there?
Yes, you eat your 5 a day, Patrick, of veggies.
You know me, absolutely, yes.
5 cheeses.
Well, you know, tomorrow when everyone's tucking into their Christmas dinner, a big part of the plate will be dedicated to vegetables. And I loved this piece in the Mail because it was actually asking where all these kind of vegetables come from. Like Brussels, of course, no surprise there. It comes from Brussels, but it originated about 7,000 years ago. And it didn't actually make its entry onto the British Christmas plate until the early 20th century.
Goodness me.
And it's like carrots. People think it's a nod to the House of Orange in Holland, but it's actually originated from southern Europe. So when we're eating our veggies tomorrow, we are having a multinational veggie plate.
An international plate of food. There we go.
Oh, it's the roast potatoes for me.
For me, well, I enjoyed learning about the carrots and the fact that actually in World War II, people thought that to disguise our secret of radar, we were able to pretend that carrots improved your eyesight.
Good stuff. Well, there we go. We'll hear more from you later on. Thank you very much. Off to a wonderful
Stephanie
start.
Tetchy and James Hill, of course.
Indeed. Well, Chris